If we fail to take action, our grandchildren will not get to experience the world as we know it today. A 4-degree temperature rise will alter every part of the world by 2100. So Southern Europe will become a desert, all up to Alps, that lose all of its snow. Most of the USA becomes a desert with strong population exodus to Canada. Amazon is gone, a large part of South America are inhabitable. Africa loses almost all of its green. Himalayas largely melt, gravely affecting the life in the subcontinent, and Bangladesh is almost completely abandoned. Large parts of Oceania are submerged, parts of Australia also remain inhabitable. The winners? Well as most migrated population, are mainly in the north. So Canada, Scandinavia, and Russia provide refuge to humanity. Is this too stark of a picture? Not unless we do change the trajectory. The US and China, who collectively account for about 43% of global CO2 emissions, have over this year displayed greater ambition to tackle the climate change. The US presidential election resulted in the victory of the candidate who had run with the most progressive climate agenda in America's history. China has in turn pledged to become carbon neutral by 2060. Unfortunately, our efforts so far are nowhere near enough. We are still on a trajectory that leads to extremely serious scenarios. So we need to act now, while also dealing with seemingly more urgent challenges. Also, we at BCG are determined to reach the net zero climate impact ourselves by 2030. But today, we would like to discuss several important areas that are crucial for bringing the real change at scale.
When it comes to protecting the environment, the fashion industry is no less ambitious. As the world's second most polluting industry and second largest consumer of its water supply, fashion brands are aiming to incorporate concrete measures into their sustainability strategies. Most notably, we can already observe a shift away from seasonality, with brands implementing new technologies to ensure their activities are more sustainable. Many fashion houses, including Dior, Chanel and Armani, have taken to live streaming their runway shows without the physical presence of an audience. We at Vogue are also determined to act responsibly. Not only have we foregone travelling to fashion weeks, but we also take a stance on important social issues, such as the 2020 women's strike in Poland. Just like the companies which signed the Fashion Pact and now show their commitment to its goals, the Condé Nast family stands by Vogue values, which represent equality, diversity and sustainability. We want to highlight the most urgent topics related to sustainability and environmental concerns. We are therefore inviting you to take part in our 4 blocks. The outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic has triggered some earth-shattering changes. Businesses went online and e-commerce has blossomed. At the same time, global mobility has halted, inevitably entailing the rise of working remotely. Amidst this turmoil, the ongoing ecological revolution received an extra boost. As a result, sustainability ceased to be just a trend and became the new reality. Given the rapid rise of the reuse, resell and upsell market, it seems clear that the industry is ready for a green revolution. However, can we be confident that consumers will play along? How important is sustainability as a purchasing factor for them? Are they ready to pay more for ecological and ethical products, or is it someone else who should bear this additional cost?
Although not traditionally associated with sustainability, financial institutions have also accepted greater responsibility towards the environment. What kind of actions have they undertaken to reduce their carbon footprint? How can the increasingly popular socially responsible investing support these efforts? By tackling these topics, we hope to encourage more banks, financial institutions, and investors to come on board. With China committing to carbon neutrality by 2060 and the upcoming Biden's administration's expected progressiveness on climate, it seems like the biggest players are finally ready to lead the change. What are the components that will make it a success? And most importantly, will these actions suffice to save our planet?
The goal is clear. We must employ all possible resources and go to great lengths in order to avoid the looming climate catastrophe. Fortunately, it seems that more and more players across different industries are realizing the gravity of the challenge ahead. Lately, we have all been witnessing the emergence of increasingly bold policies and initiatives introduced by the full spectrum of companies.
By hosting this conference, we want to inspire our audience by highlighting some of the best practices across different industries globally. This is why we have invited sustainability leaders from such industries as fashion and luxury, consumer retail, automotive, banking, private equity, and more. Tune in to hear their insights on both the corporate and individual efforts to mitigate the adverse effects of global warming. No man is an island, therefore it is only once everyone is on board that a truly meaningful and lasting change can be induced. Yet, in order for this change to fully materialize, we must first defeat the pandemic. And hence, our opening panel will attempt to answer the question on whether COVID-19 undermined or actually sped up sustainability efforts of the world.
Welcome everyone. My name is Joanna Dutowska. I'm a project leader and leader of consumer and sustainability practice at BCG Warsaw office.
Hi, I'm Magdalena Lemanska and I work as the Chief Sustainability Officer at the Polish edition of Vogue magazine.
Today, we're going to have the pleasure of moderating discussions panel for the Sustainable Reflections for the Year edition 2021 online conference. The reason why our organizations decided to devote this panel to sustainability agenda is simply because we cannot wait any longer. The pandemic should not be an excuse to avoid and delay any further climate change actions.
As you're about to see, the corporate world has learned its lesson. What about individuals, though? Are they, as consumers, willing to make environmentally friendly choices?
So according to our latest research, up to 70% of consumers is willing to pay 10% higher price for sustainable product. Yet, in the same time, up to 25% of consumers doesn't even want to consider purchase of the products that are sustainable, even if offered the same price. Mostly it is because of the concerns of their quality and also lack of understanding what is sustainable versus not.
And you will be able to access more in-depth information on that matter in our upcoming Consumers' Adaptability to Sustainability in Fashion and Luxury report, on which BCG has been working with Vogue Poland. Meanwhile, we would like to invite you to our first panel.
In spite of appearances, digital economy and financial institutions have significant impact on sustainability matter. The most intuitive example involves obviously investors who can choose to base their portfolios on environmentally friendly or not projects. And what's interesting, it seems to be strategically good direction, as the latest analysis show that those stocks of sustainable companies perform better by approximately 4.8%.
Is sustainability a good investment, though? And how else can the sector support global efforts to mitigate the effects of climate change? We will attempt to find answers to these and other very interesting and important questions, along with the following speakers.
Krzysztof Krawczyk, head of Warsaw office and a partner at CVC Capital Partners, one of the world's leading private equity investment advisory firms. He's also a board member of CVC's portfolio companies such as PKP Energetyka, Żabka, Dimarin, and AR Packaging. Has over 20 years of successful track record in European private equity and served on the boards of numerous private, publicly listed companies across industries, telecom, media, manufacturing, logistics, healthcare sector through the whole CE region.
And Matt Komorowski, who's the Senior Director of Channel Partners at PayPal, who's responsible for leading PayPal's commercial partnership teams across the company's over 100 international markets, including Brazil, China, Hong Kong, India, Japan, Mexico, Poland, and Singapore. Prior to his work at PayPal, he has worked as a consultant at the Boston Consulting Group and was also the head of sales at Groupon. So let us kick off, Matt, with a question to you. Although not traditionally associated with sustainability, the financial institutions are increasingly assuming greater responsibility towards the environment. So could you tell us what kind of action has PayPal undertaken to reduce its carbon footprint?
First of all, I believe all companies have a responsibility to their employees and to customers to make conscious decisions about sustainability. For PayPal, environmental sustainability is a critical part of upholding our company values. Over the past couple of years, we've advanced our environmental sustainability program across three key areas. So first of all, it's reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So in 2019, we matched 65% of the energy that we used in our own and also leased data centers with renewable energy. The plan is to get up to 100% by 2023. We've managed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 10% over the previous year. And in addition to that, our total energy consumption actually remained flat, even though our business has experienced quite significant growth over the past year. So that's the first area. Secondly, it's water consumption. So we have various water conservation measures across our operations, including things like smart sensors and low flow fixtures in our offices. We have water efficiency monitoring in our data centers. And thirdly, around waste management. So nearly all of our offices have implemented recycling programs. Many of them have composting programs in place. In addition to that, we've launched what the iZettle Ocean Reader, which is the first card terminal in the world made out of recycled ocean plastic. And lastly, we've aligned ourselves with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. These are 17 goals that they've laid out, and we are directly and positively contributing to 10 of those.
So, Krzysztof, building on what Matt just said, and also looking at the broader portfolio, when we look at ESG funds, we can see that data indicates that 60% of those not only outperform conventional ones, but also demonstrates lower volatility in the times of the crisis. From your perspective, are these advantages already impacting investors' business decisions, and can be their go no go factor for the given investments?
Well, I think to understand the importance of ESG and sustainable approach, one need a time machine to understand how much of a change is required. If you move back to 1970. Milton Friedman wrote an article in New York Times titled "The Social Responsibility of Businesses to Increase Its Profits." And as essentially, the article's thesis was that any corporation should use its resources and engage in activities in order to increase the profits to the shareholders as long as it stays within the rules of the game. I think that's a very important point. Half a century later, Martin Wolf, a chief economics commentator of Financial Times, a fairly measured gentleman and fairly balanced newspaper, published an article saying Milton Friedman was wrong. And essentially, if we look how the whole world of business and the whole globe got complex and challenged by activities of the corporates. After 50 years, the answer to Milton Friedman's thesis is that as long as you stay within the rules of the game, got very complex. And today, any corporation realizes that in order to build a long-term profits for the shareholders, one needs to address the whole universe of stakeholders. Another example, let's move with this time machine back to 1978, the US Business Roundtable, so an organization that gathers the most prominent CEOs of US. Since 1978, they've been publishing the corporate governance principles. And over decades, these principles were around the shareholder supremacy. In 2019, for the first time, more than 180 CEOs, including people like Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, signed a new manifesto saying that the only way forward for U.S. corporations is to address all stakeholders. And these are not just investors, shareholders, these are also employees, communities, suppliers, and customers. And if you deep dive into each of these individual groups, and as an investor, we understand that the only way to build businesses that last is to make sure that our customers are happy and they're getting a fair game from us. Our employees are engaged and they're being fairly paid. Our communities are not used, they are part of our ecosystem, and the way we collaborate with them should be with respect and should be in an environmentally friendly way. So to conclude on your question, it's not a matter whether ESG is an interesting niche strategy, is the only strategy forward.
But just to build a second on that, do you believe this factor is already go, no go for some of the investment? Is it already so strong that it impacts so deeply the decisions?
Absolutely. If you read the annual letter that Larry Fink he's a founder and CEO of BlackRock, globe's largest asset manager, he is solely focused on this point, exactly for the reason I mentioned. There is no ESG strategy and business strategy. Any business strategy, in order to be successful in the long run, need to address E, S, and G.
Yeah, so I mean, you partly answered my next question to you, but I'd kind of to dive deeper into what you just discussed, given the ESG factors and its impact. So the Polish Forbes recently featured Ela Madej's 50 years VC firm, which, just for the audience to know, invests in businesses that aim at solving world's biggest problems, thus bringing us closer to the fulfillment of UN Sustainable Development Goals mentioned by Matt. So Krzysztof, do you think that allocating capital to such initiatives is the way forward to advance the sustainability agenda?
Absolutely. First of all, I think last year, the amount of capital that has been flowing into the sustainable assets, so the strategies that are based on sustainability, increased by almost 100%. So there is clearly an inflow of capital that recognizes that in order to optimize the profits in the long run, we need to pick those companies, those strategies that are sustainable. So clearly these asset classes are attracting a lot of capital. But from our perspective as a investor, we are not naive. A lot of our targets have a way to go. So when we invest in them, they may still have deficits and deficiencies in elements of the ESG strategy. And us as a value-added investor, our sole focus is to create the strategies and support the management teams in order to eliminate these deficits. And the other point is that when we exit our companies, especially through an IPO, we increasingly see that part of the due diligence of the investors is sustainability agenda. Hence, in order to generate profits for our investors, that are pension funds, that are university endowments, we also need to make sure that during our tenure as a shareholder, for 5, 6, 7 years with a portfolio company, ESG needs to be a kernel of the business strategy.
So, Matt, now we've been talking briefly about, the direction of the different group of stakeholders. They're going towards the sustainability, to support sustainability agenda through different ways through different initiatives. And as both yourself and Krzysztof mentioned, this is not only happening within one group, but it needs to happen within basically the whole ecosystem. But then on the other hand, we've got some financial innovations, like, for example, cryptocurrencies that question basically the environmental impact, especially when it comes to electricity consumption. If we look at two currently the most popular ones, so Bitcoin and Ethereum, they combine, they use as much energy as entire Finland. And of course, the demand, especially within the last year, is growing. Do you see that any solution how this problem can be tackled and how the digital currencies can actually speed up the game when it comes to the sustainability?
That's definitely a fantastic question, especially right now. I mean, crypto is an extremely hot topic. I mean, a few days ago, Elon Musk announced that he's investing 1.5 billion in Bitcoin. Yeah. We've seen Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies at or near all-time highs. To add to that, in October, PayPal launched a new feature that enables our consumers in the US to buy, hold, and sell crypto through the app. We're looking to actually enable using crypto as a funding source to allow those users to make purchases across our network of 26 million merchants worldwide. So that adoption and utility of crypto, not just one, but several cryptos, is going to be increasing, including the fact that we'll be rolling those features out in a number of other countries this year. So the sustainability of that's definitely it's a very important question, one that's definitely needs to be addressed. And I mean, I think the first place to address that is definitely around the providers of cryptocurrencies and what kind of sustainability plans they have. I think as a general note, I think that the private sector needs to find ways to work together with public and nonprofit partners to figure out what are sustainable ways to help crypto grow. I mean, there's obviously in traditional monetary systems with cash, the production, the movement, the management of cash. I mean, there's a lot of inefficiencies in that system as well that can definitely be replaced with something more efficient. And I think crypto is at an early stage right now, and most innovations and inventions at early stages are quite inefficient, and they gain efficiency and effectiveness with time. Whether it's combustion engines going into electric, whether it's computer processing efficiency, I believe the same thing will happen with crypto. That it'll follow a similar dynamic as it grows and as it gains efficiency, as it gains adoption.
Okay, so unfortunately we're about to finish this short but very concise panel, and just wanted to ask you one last question. Your own personal sustainable reflection for 2021, given the business you're in. What is the future? What does the future hold for us, and what do you think? So from both of you gentlemen, if we could hear, what are your thoughts on that?
Matt, do you want to go first?
Thank you. I'm optimistic. I think that the pandemic has given people a lot of time to reflect on how we do business, on how we manage our own lives, on how much we travel, on what we do in terms of our own carbon footprints, and the fact that we've been in a way forced to slow down and relook at how we do things has given a moment to reflect and start planning that out. And I think that's visible in terms of what governments are doing in terms of signing up for different climate accords. I mean, China has committed to a date by which they want to become much more efficient. Whether that we can argue one way or the other whether that's the right date, but I mean the fact that they've made that statement, in my opinion, is huge. Corporations, companies are doing the same thing, and it's an important topic on those agendas for publicly traded companies, for private companies, and for individuals. So I'm very hopeful. I'm very optimistic. I just hope that we don't slow down, but we continue accelerating in that direction.
Thank you.
Look, really difficult to distinguish between each area, but the pandemic has clearly put a focus on people. And as an activist investor, our sole focus right now is to make sure that the well-being of our employees, the well-being of our business partners is central in all the actions that we're taking. The last 12 plus months have been a big test of businesses' solidarity, businesses supporting each other, and also reallocating parts of our profits for charitable donations, supporting governments that have not been well prepared for what is happening, and helping them move personal protection equipment from China to Central Europe, and making sure that our businesses are still operating, because some of them provide vital services. In the same time, really want to stay close to our employees, our managers, to give them a lot of support, so they stay engaged, they still see their purpose, even though if they're locked.
So what is your reflection going forward in the post-pandemic world? Hopefully, well, it's been prolonged. The studies show it's going to be longer than anticipated. But what is your sustainable reflection for the new reality that's going to occur afterwards?
Ironically, I really appreciate the fact that we have to travel less. We are leaving much less carbon footprint, but not taking all these, flights every week. And we see that they were not really necessary. We can communicate over video. It does not have the full experience, and still in-person, face-to-face interaction is crucial, but it should also be unique. It should also be protected for very special situations. We don't need to devastate environment by flying every week to any location.
Thank you. Thank you for this very personal and optimistic, I would say, the reflections that are ending our panel. Thank you both, Krzysztof, Matt, for participating and uncovering the lesser-known links between, the world of finance, sustainability for our audience. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Let's begin our next panel, which is entitled "Consumers, Do They Buy It? Is Sustainable Necessarily Premium?" So having extensively discussed today the impact of COVID-19, we now want to kind of shift on the changes that have occurred because of COVID and on to changes that have been emerging for longer than the coronavirus is around. So let's shift our attention to the consumer.
So as we discussed also on the previous panel, and sustainability is becoming more and more important for the majority of the consumers, both when we think about the awareness, declarations, but also the actual purchase, even if it means the slight increase of the price. What's also important is that the companies are aware of the consumer not only willingness, but actually expectations that companies work within this direction. And as a result, they keep improving their operation, they make their supply chain more sustainable, they introduce some circular economy strategies. So for example, reuse or reselling that are projected, for example, in apparel market to grow by 55% annually within the next 4 years.
Yet, it is still up for debate who should be bearing the costs of the firm's adaptation to sustainability. Should it be the consumers? Should it be businesses, or perhaps even governments? And are there any other country differences in the approach towards the green transformation in retail, for example? So we're going to ask these questions to the following panelists. Anna Pawlak-Kuliga, CEO of IKEA China. From September 2018, Anna started her new role in China as CEO and president of IKEA China, leading IKEA companies into the Chinese market. Outside IKEA, Anna is actively engaged also in voluntary jobs. She was the client advisory board member of Facebook Poland, and to this day remains the program board member for United Nations Global Compact.
Dagmara Brzezińska, Commercial Category Director in Allegro, responsible for all segment divisions in Allegro. In the past, worked for the British American Tobacco, Coty, Miss Sporty, Rimmel, L'Oreal, Unilever, and Notino.
And Michael Love is CEO of Netto International and a member of Sailing Group Executive Committee since September 2017. Previously worked as CEO at Super Brugsen, Coop Denmark, and Kingfisher in the UK and Ireland. Thank you for accepting our invitation to speak with us today.
So let's kick off this. Let's kick off this panel, and Michael, let me start with relatively broad question to yourself. So, according to latest BCG research, around 75% of the consumers believe sustainability is an important matter. Do you see this as purely non-binding declaration, or do you actually see the shift how the consumer shop can sustainably become actual purchasing factor even for some of those?
There is definitely an interest from consumers to buy more responsibly products. And you definitely see a shift towards, and it is driving a lot of innovation. It's driving some changes in the ranges in our stores. So we've introduced a vegan range. We've increased our organic ranges. So lots of things are happening from a sustainability point of view. Having said that, it's still not a significant part of our turnover and sales. And as a discounter, I am very keenly aware that if you really want to create change, then the most sustainable products also have to cost the least. And I think there are numerous examples of that fact. In Denmark, we have a high share of organics. I don't think I've seen a market where you have a higher market share of organic products than in Denmark, and it's about 10% of grocery sales on organic products, and we have a huge range, and it's been something we talked about for 20 years. And everybody has this view that it's definitely better for the environment. It's so fine, but it's still only after 20 years and a huge range and a lot of focus, it's still only 10% of total sales. And I think the reason is quite simple. It is that it's still a little more expensive than conventional products. So it doesn't really shift the consumer behavior before you actually get the price down. So consumers are demanding, and then they are looking for it, and it is driving some sales, but the reality is we need to get the prices down before it really shifts.
But Michael, do you see that maybe even opposite effect, meaning like, okay, this is, let's say, in the very developed economy, we can say as Denmark in terms of the sustainability awareness, right? And you say a lot of focus, a lot of time, a lot of effort, broad assortment, etc. And it's still relatively small range, both when it comes to the actual range and also sales impact. But what about, for example, if you didn't have it? Do you believe that it actually brings negative on the, on the netto if you don't have the broad range of that?
Yes. For sure. So we would lose some of the more attractive customers if we did not have organics at all. I think at this stage we could probably take out all our vegan products and still do fine. But organic products we wouldn't be able to take out. So from that perspective, you're right. It has a bigger impact than just the sales, the direct sales of organic products. I think an important point to make is when we talk about the cost of products, there is not necessarily a cost to bear for either customers or the government or even the companies. So I think if we were to sort of have for lack of, I know it's a hotly debated topic, but if there were a carbon tax and you can reflect that on the products that we sell, I think quite naturally the consumer behavior would switch around, and I think I'm not sure anybody would be more unhappy than they are today.
So kind of, Dagmar, diving into what Michael just said and talking about the consumer and the customer's needs. So one of the pillars of Allegro's 2020-2023 CSR and sustainability strategy outlines the company's aspiration to become a platform that enables its users to make sustainable choices. So how significant will the role of reused goods in accomplishing this mission be? And research shows that an e-shop that expands its offering by such stock can expect its number of visits to rise by up to 70%. So the major players in the sector seem to have recognized that, for example, entering collaborations with startups to start reselling used clothes. So what activities, could you tell us, what activities did Allegro implement and still plans to implement in that matter?
Well, we do see the trend of giving the second life to goods and that we do not need or use anymore. And already 82% of Polish online shoppers buy and sell second-hand goods. So we did see that, and that's why actually a year ago we launched Allegro Lokalnie, a platform dedicated for those who want to sell occasionally. And according to a recent study conducted by Allegro Lokalnie team and SW Research, we found out that respondents who actually buy the clothes or any other product, goods on Allegro Lokalnie, they make better choices. They make more conscious choices. Why? Because 46% of them is choosing a smaller number of items they want to buy. And very interestingly, also 62% is paying more attention to quality, 61% to the signs of use, and 56% to the low price. So price is not really the primary element and the most important element to make a good choice, but really the quality that it stands behind it. So we see that actually the conscious choice among those who are actually reusing the clothes and the other products is actually much higher. So what we are doing, we are constantly, to be honest, developing and promoting Allegro Lokalnie. We already reached 8 million visitors per week. And we have 1.9 million active offers that consumers can choose from. And in Q2 in 2020, we became second most popular platform for occasional sales in Poland. And on top, we are the most popular shopping platform in Poland, and we are giving a great deal of attention to the CSR area. We established our goals in our 2020-2023 CSR and sustainability strategy, and we are systematically implementing solutions that will help us to meet the goals. We help consumers to make better choices, of course, and also to support the local businesses. But also in the same time, we are engaged in multiple projects and educational projects, as well as charity projects. So these are actually some of the points we made very clear in our CSR and sustainability strategy.
Thank you.
So I think
82%. It's really it's an unbelievable number that you said that the consumers shopping online are also reselling online. Well, that's a very good trend. Reuse, upsell, definitely something leading to sustainability.
But I think it's very interesting that what Michael said at the beginning, Dagmara, yourself, is like basically a bit different, opinion when it comes to the importance of the price. But I think we both agree that it's all about the value for money, right? And if do customers, I think that's the sentence. So it can be cheaper, it can be a bit higher, but it's really about the value for money, how consumers use. And of course, considering especially the COVID situation, the marketplaces, and the growing importance of the marketplaces, growing importance of the resale, that is basically, as mentioned at the beginning, growing around 54% on the yearly basis, is a great opportunity to use. But Michael, coming for a second to the physical channel, so the more traditional one that still the most of the consumers are actually using, especially when we talk about the grocery itself. We mentioned, we talked at the beginning about the consumers and the price perspective, mostly from the range, right, perspective, like how the broad is the assortment, how price applies to that. But of course, I know that Netto is working also on the other initiatives when it comes to the sustainability. And in 2020, Netto basically announced the construction of the first fully recyclable store. Is this something that you are planning as a company, both in Denmark, as I assume the most advanced when it comes to sustainability, and the first country as a pilot, and then launch this to another countries? Is a part of the longer strategy, or how do you see this?
Yes, it absolutely is part of the bigger strategy in Netto to launch these stores. So we put in a lot of effort to design a store that was more environmentally friendly, both in terms of the climate impact from the construction of the store. So, for instance, we use very little cement, which gives off a lot of carbon dioxide, and use instead sustainably sourced wood as the structure for the store. And we've used elements in the store that can be taken apart. So normally when you tear down a building, you actually have to destroy it. In this case, you can reuse a lot of the materials when you have to take this building down in, I don't know, 20 or 30 years. And of course, there's also a lot of other elements to the store. There's a grass roof. There is a cooling and heating system that is completely optimized, where we use the excess heat from the chillers to heat the store. And we even have a battery in the store that can run the store for about 3 hours, because typically at night you have only power coming from sustainable sources, renewable sources, and you can charge the batteries, and then you can use those batteries during the day when most of the energy is coming from coal-fired power plants. So there's a lot of elements to this store, and it was very important to us that we didn't just create a one-off store. So we've spent a lot of time working through every single detail so that the cost of building this type of store comes down, so that it's something that can become our new standard. And of course, we are building a fair amount of new stores, particularly in Poland. And so it was important to us that we have a standard building that is more environmentally friendly, because I think that's the way we want to go, and I think customers will expect that of us as well as we move forward.
Hopefully the store of the future for across the whole network.
Yes, I hope so too. Yeah, and it looks great, by the way. I have to say that too. It's an awesome looking store. Yes.
So coming back to you, Dagmara, coming back a little bit what you've expanded on, and Allegro Lokalnie. So as we observe, the consumers' environmental awareness is increasing, and they embrace such elements like examples of circular economy, reuse and resell. So besides Allegro Lokalnie, what measures have you implemented, and have you adapted to these emerging clients' expectations, or maybe you're planning to implement, and you can share with us that include your strategy for the years to come?
Well, to be honest, one of the fantastic, in my opinion, implementations also to promote Allegro Lokalnie was to integrate as well Allegro Charity. And this is actually an important project because it promotes as well, for those who don't like to sell, who is not a seller type and so on and so forth, we can actually add additional value because you can sell your goods, your products on Allegro Lokalnie and choose from the list of local charity causes one charity that you would like to support. So you can decide whether you are going to give 100% or 50% or whichever percent of the transaction that you would like to pass to this charity cause. And in my opinion, this is actually additional, a very important point here, because we not only create a conscious choice consumer base, those who would like to resell, reuse the products, and they see that it's a fantastic trend. It's conscious, environmental consciousness here plays the important role, but also it is trendy and it's great that it is. But let's make it and let's combine it with something that gives additional sense to it. And this we did with Allegro Lokalnie. And I'm super proud to say that for the first for 4 months in the last year until December, over 65% of local charity causes actually achieved their goals, achieved what they were aiming for. So we actually make these lives, the lives of these charity founders, very easy actually, to be honest, because it was thanks to Allegro Lokalnie that they gathered almost 165,000 Polish zlotys. So, in my opinion, this is additional point why, in my opinion, we should create solutions that have additional meaning and give consumers a very conscious choice what they would like to do.
I think it's very beautiful how you ended this up, Dagmara, to be honest. And both examples that yourself and Michael shared are really, I think, really incredible examples how innovative examples can be within, in our daily life, I would even say, right? Yeah. Considering the importance of Allegro on the Polish market, and also the network of Netto, especially soon, basically. So I think it's very important, considering that these innovations are really present for the regular consumers, and they can see those. I think this is really beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. And how sustainability is a very broad term, and we can implement different strategies to realize our SDG goals going forward. That's very important as well.
Anna, we broadly discussed already about importance of sustainability from the consumer angle, and also the fact that they are becoming more and more aware. And while there seems to be a relatively broad consensus that it's desirable that for the companies to have this sustainability as part of the products, of the communication, basically within the whole strategy of the company, it still remains the questions whether the consumer should be paying for that or not. And in your opinion, who should be bearing the cost when it comes, or especially when it comes to the transformation the companies are facing, right? Is it on the side of the governments and organizations? Is it on the side of the producers, retailers, or maybe exactly consumers? Or maybe, as we are all working within the same ecosystem, is it that every one of us should contribute in a way?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's a great privilege to talk about sustainability with such a great guest and also audience. Well, the bottom line is that none of the nations, none of the societies or communities, big or small ones, will be successful if sustainability will be only luxury for a few. It has to be affordable for the many. And we as IKEA, we know by asking the customers, not only across China market, from Shanghai to Zhengzhou, from Harbin to Shenzhen, but also across many markets in the world when we operate, that customers really do care about big things in life, like sustainability, but they want it to be attractive, affordable, and easy. And this is where they expect business to help them actually to embrace sustainability in everyday life. We as IKEA, we have decided many years ago to take sustainability as one of our pillars and strategic initiative across the value chain. So actually sustainability is in our DNA. We take sustainability into account from actually a moment we are designing the product. We also very carefully choosing what is product made of. We actually very carefully thinking how products is contributing to the better everyday life for the many people across the world. Also, we are very carefully choosing how the product is transported to our units across the world and also to our customers' homes. And last but not least, we are very carefully, consciously thinking actually every day how to improve our operations so it has the minimum footprint, negative footprint towards the planet. And then, of course, each company has a choice. You can make affordable or expensive products. You can make functional or useless product. You can make sustainable or non-sustainable product. We as IKEA, we have decided to make affordable, beautiful, sustainable, and functional products because actually we do care, and we want actually by 2030 to enable 1 billion people across the world to live more healthy and sustainable life by providing towards them affordable, sustainable products and solutions.
So Anna, in 2020, IKEA has launched its first ever secondhand furniture store in Sweden. So do you expect the idea behind it to spread, resulting in the opening of more such shops? And maybe perhaps can you imagine them mushrooming in China?
Yes, indeed. I think the example you mentioned in Sweden is a great achievement, and it's a part, of course, of the bigger picture when it comes to the circular economy. And of course, in China, we have very ambitious plan when it comes to the sustainability agenda. We were actually first market in the world who had first city in the whole IKEA world, Shanghai, with 100% last mile deliveries in green. And I'm very happy also to share with you that from the 1st of January this year, we have 90% of the home deliveries in China across the market being green. So this is the one aspect actually of our operations. Then a second aspect, of course, is the whole agenda when it comes to the circular economy. We have a lot of initiatives about the closing the loop in the cardboard. From all our stores across China, the cardboard waste goes to the factories when the cardboard is used in the new packaging, and actually is fulfilling more than 70% of our needs for the market. We work with the many customers actually introducing very soon, I will not reveal the date, they actually resell services as such, because we know that many customers who doesn't want to have products anymore, they're very conscious and very worried about actually how to dispose them. And we decided at IKEA that waste is a resource. So for us, of course, it's very important to enable the many people, to help them actually to manage their daily life, their way of actually interacting with the products in a way that is a positive footprint towards the people and planet, simply. And of course, looking to the bigger picture of IKEA, we as a business people, we have decided actually on very simple goals, because we manage what we measure, and also we manage what we care about, and we do care about sustainability. So we have decided very three simple goals. We have decided that by 2030, as IKEA, we're going to enable 1 billion people across the world to live more sustainable life and more healthy life by actually providing to them affordable, sustainable products and solutions. We as well decided by 2030 that 100% of our products and packaging will be done from renewable and recyclable materials. And we're going to be fully run by and powered by the renewable energy. And thirdly, we have decided that by 2030, we're going to be a great example of the partner and also employer, working very closely with a lot of communities across the value chain, across the markets, and also with many organizations to really support the ones who are the needs at most. So those are the principles we have decided, and goals are fully on track. I'm also super happy to share with you that actually 100% of our cotton is coming from the more sustainable sources. 75% of our wood is from more sustainable sources. We have across the market implemented the wastewater when it comes to our food business, etc., etc. So there's many examples actually across the operations value chain, from the customer to the supply chain. Actually, sustainability is integrated part of it, and circularity is the future. I think if we think about the future today and we have long-term view on the business, on the trends that are around us, we have to also acknowledge the fact that we as a generation, we are facing many great things around us, but also we are the ones who actually are observing that cities are growing around us as never before. We know that many markets, people are coming out of poverty like never before. And also nature is explored as never before. So actually it's time to really educate many people around us, of course, much more ourselves as a business leaders, and also around sustainability. It's important to educate our children to live healthy life. It's important to talk to the consumers on daily basis, how we actually businesses can support them to live more sustainable life every day, because it's about everyday choices that we make. It's time to actually clean the oceans. It's time to have a clean air. It's time to be responsible.
But considering the time, we've got one more question to you guys about your personal reflections of the sustainability for 2021.
I'm a vegetarian from the ethical point of view. I'm supporting, all the animal organizations, and I decided that this year I'm going to promote it even more among my friends, and to become, let's say, a very loud right now ambassador of not eating meat. So that's my really personal goal, because in my opinion, this is not only about the need to support the animals and to make their life much better, but also to reduce the CO2 emissions to the atmosphere, and also make our planet more green. And in my opinion, this is actually, the choices that we make in food, and whatever we are doing, like the choices of buying the second-hand bag. Why not? This is a beautiful thing. Don't buy too many things. Just reduce it. This year, actually, and also last year, I reduced a lot the number of clothes I was buying, because I actually started to reuse my clothes. I have a fantastic tailor. I have this fantastic, person who is helping me to do that. But yes, indeed, I have reworked many of my dresses into blouses and skirts and so on. And I think this makes, first of all, the clothing and the whole, area of fashion more fun. And secondly, Indeed. It is actually building my feeling of let's stop for a while. You don't need that many things. Just, look at what is around you, use it, be creative, and really have fun. So I have these two causes for sure for this year. So please don't eat meat. That's my, I would be grateful.
Thank you. That was really inspiring. And now you, Michael, what are your thoughts, sustainable reflections?
Well, I mean, slightly related, and I'm going to disappoint you. It's not about making smart dresses out of the clothes that I no longer use, but it is about the climate and the effect what we eat have on it. I have had the honor of being chairman of a government climate partnership for trade in Denmark, and as part of that, Selling Group, which owns Netto, paid for a big research project looking at the climate impact from the 500 most commonly used grocery products bought in supermarkets. And it is staggering the difference it has, the difference different products have on climate. About 20% of the carbon dioxide equivalent that each person emits on average comes from what we eat. And there is, and I hate to say it, and I don't want to be lifting, pointing fingers or anything, but meat is an issue. Particularly certain kinds of meat and certain kinds of dairy products have a huge impact on the climate. An area the size of the entire South America and entire North America is currently being used for animal production and animal products, so like dairy products. And that is an area that simply isn't absorbing carbon dioxide. Actually, it's more or less releasing carbon dioxide, and it is a huge problem, particularly when you are replacing fields with you're cutting down forests to have fields so you can grow feed for animals to produce meat and dairy. It's just the impact on the environment is enormous. And I think one of my ambition this coming year is to somehow make that knowledge more easily available to customers when they are making their ordinary daily choices of what to eat. I think we as retailers have a real opportunity to actually shift behaviors from some types of products to others without lifting our fingers, without it costing more for customers. And that is my big ambition for this year, is to use the knowledge that we now have from this climate database to change behaviors.
My personal view on the sustainability, it's a very interesting question, but maybe I will reply like this. I wish that many of us in this call have possibility and privilege to live long life, up to 90, 100 years old. And personally, when I'm gonna be at this age, I would like to look into the mirror, seeing my face with a lot of signs of the past on my face, wrinkles, and at the same time, I would like to look myself in the eyes and say that I did at most as a mother, as a business leader, as a consumer, that I'm very confident and very calm about the fact that my son has a great future on this planet, and he can breathe clean air, he can drink clean water, and he can be healthy. At the end of the day, this is all about this. And I know that many of us is working every day. We commute to work, we have, we make daily choices here and there. But at the end of the day, we have to also be able, as a humanity and our generation, to really zoom out and be the ones, and I truly believe this is the case, that we're going to be the ones who truly will turn the trend, and we're going to be the one generation that will actually live good future for our generations to come. Nothing else matters.
Many thanks to our speakers for joining us today and giving us the insight to the best sustainability practices. So, hello everybody. It's our pleasure to have you at our next panel, which is entitled COVID-19, a boost or hindrance to sustainability efforts.
So, outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic has undoubtedly turned the world as we know it upside down. Some of the changes catalyzed could be here to stay. Examples include business travel, which experts estimate to be reduced by 36%, the way we shop with increasing importance of the e-commerce and omni-channel, or the remote work, which according to latest BCG analysis will eventually evolve into the hybrid work model.
Meanwhile, businesses went to great lengths to successfully move their activities online. An example would be fashion and luxury brands, as well as art institutions, who are no exception to the rule. So how did these top players respond to these unprecedented changes, and how did these measures that they've undertaken affect the environment? These and other questions will be addressed today by our guests, and these are Francis Morris, the director at Tate Museum London since 2016. Francis has led the transformation of Tate's international collection, strategically broadening and diversifying its international reach, developing the collecting of live art and performance, and pioneering new forms of museum display. Thank you, Francis, for accepting our invitation. Next, we have Dunia Wan. Dunia joined Vestiaire Collective in March 2020 as Chief of Sustainability and Inclusion Officer, bringing her initiative, high standards, and ecological and societal vision to a brand. With a very focused background at the high level, Dunia Wan has worked on sustainable development issues for some of France's biggest institutions, including Ministère du Logement, Ministère de la Transition écologique, Assemblée nationale, and others. Thank you, Dunia, for accepting our invitation to speak today.
Michael Butler, as the Director of Sustainability Operations since 2011, Michael has been integral to operationalizing sustainability at Kering. He leads a team that measures Kering progress on reducing its environmental sorry guys, we've got the technical problem. Its environmental impacts and address social concerns in the supply chain. This includes the development and implementations of the environmental profit and loss account and engagement with Kering stakeholders and investors on sustainability progress. So starting with the panel and this, let's kick off really this very interesting discussions. So Michael, let us start with yourself. So Kering is one of the signatories of the famous, of course, Fashion Pact, which is a global coalition of fashion and textile companies committed to reduce the industry environmental footprint, and it includes the most important players from the mass to the luxury. What are the goals that you hope to achieve together within this year, especially including the impact that potential pandemic could bring to the initial targets?
Well, I think the first thing is what we learned as Kering as an actor in an ecosystem. There's many, many other actors. So it's also something called the Tragedy of the Commons, which was written about 500 years ago. And it's the same thing. We have many people that are looking for resources from the same areas. Only through concerted action can you really change the paradigm. So that was the idea behind the Fashion Pact, which originally President Emmanuel Macron of France had asked François-Henri, our CEO, to organize the fashion industry for the G7 at that point, but now it's continued and it's evolved. So what's important about that is, one, I think this is the first time you see fashion brands at a CEO level focused on key challenges such as climate change, such as biodiversity, such as eliminating plastic or single-use plastic. So that's, I think, one part right there. Then we have a lot of frameworks such as the climate dialogues, I want to call that, but the UNFCCC for fashion, Fashion Charter, for instance, where we're also working with those, Ellen MacArtan Foundation, other organizations to sort of bring everyone together to focus on these issues. But for us at Kering, when you ask about COVID-19 and the fashion industry, I can speak to at Kering, I think it's been an accelerator. People have realized now that global issues are global issues. We've always known that in sustainability, and I think our leadership has been very much aware of the need for global action. But what COVID-19 now has reminded the industry is that indeed, when you have issues like climate change, like biodiversity, that are global issues, it's only through concerted action, just like everyone is going to having to work together to mitigate, I guess is the medical word, but to contain COVID-19. And that provides a blueprint for everything we're doing. It requires concerted action toward a common goal. And when you look at Fashion Pact is concerted action toward common goals. So I think it can act as an accelerator.
Okay, so thank you, Michael. So now I would like to move to Francis, staying on the topic of COVID-19, and so in response to the outbreak of the pandemic, cultural institutions started organizing online shows and also implementing innovative technologies such as virtual reality. And I would like to ask you, what initiative has Tate introduced to carry out in the new reality, post-pandemic reality? And do you believe these solutions are there to stay once things go back to normal, whatever that means, and whenever that happens? Or do you think this shifted your mindset and your attitude towards displaying and producing and collaborating with artists?
Okay, so that's a very good question. I mean, I think in the immediate impact of the pandemic and the rush to close galleries and spaces, Tate, like a number of other institutions, immediately shifted its attention from the real world to the virtual world. And over the course of particularly the first lockdown, we did some really, I think, very powerful programs for children being homeschooled, for example, programs around making. And we also made sort of filmic demonstrations of our exhibitions and made those available. And a lot of other things went on shifting to the digital sphere. But I think, and there are lots of learnings from that. And certainly we now have a very much sort of blended approach to program that you cannot be a big player without commanding digital space. But equally, I think it's brought home to us how important the real space of the institution is. And I think it's worth saying that before the pandemic, at Tate and across the sector, I think we were increasingly aware of a kind of divergence between our values, the things we really believe in art and creativity, in community, and the values that we speak through our programs, which are very often measured in terms of KPIs. And you have to remember that Tate Modern in the last few years has been amongst, if not the most successful and popular museum of modern art in the world, at least up there with the top three. And I think and colleagues have been really aware that actually our true values, which sit within a commitment to diversity, to equality and sustainability, was simply not being realized with the model that we had, the business model, what you could call the blockbuster model, much as we love big exhibitions. So what COVID did, it did something that is very difficult for an institution to do. COVID broke the model. Very difficult to break your own model. You can't drop yourself on the floor. But COVID enforced this sort of rupture to our system, and it has afforded this, at the same time as it's created deep anxiety, it's also created this amazing moment for rethinking everything we do. And sustainability, and I mean that in the broadest sense, in the terms of the UN sustainability goals, not just around climate, but around racial equality, social justice, have to come to the fore in their wake. And being more technical, the impact of COVID has meant that we have a very small income compared to our previous income. So programs, we really have to think about what we value. We've slowed things down. We've pulled things out. We've cut things back to the real core. So we now have a wonderful opportunity. At the moment, we're in the kind of reduction phase, but we then will reset the institution. And in due course, we hope to revive. And what we would revive, we hope will look like a very different Tate from the Tate that we have left behind as a result of COVID. And I think that kind of feeling of, and I hate that phrase, build back better, is really important. And we have to hold to that now. The danger is we just all want to get out there and get on a plane and start partying again. So it's how we calibrate the kind of loss and the desire to return to normality with really the need to grasp the nettle at this point.
But Frances, based on what you say and what Michael say, it seems like that basically despite all the challenges we see within through the COVID, we actually, the companies, the organization, they find a way to work through that, and it actually is able to support sustainability matter. And Dunia, if I think about the value proposition Vestir collective has, and the business model and the channels through you operate, it actually seems that pandemic, as in the case what at the beginning Michael mentioned, could be even the accelerator when it comes to the sustainability matter, because exactly of the value proposition and the model you have. So how would you say the pandemic brought it the closer to the fulfillment of your sustainable development goals?
Yeah, that's a good question, and actually I can hear what Francis says when she said that COVID brought something that institution didn't have, but fortunately at Vestir, so Vestir was built 11 years ago after a crisis. So I think the co-founder built a business model really resilient. So just to give you an idea how sustainability is strong into Vestir collective vision and mission, we want to transform the fashion industry for a more sustainable future by empowering a community of fashion activists to drive the change toward all the sector. So I would say that overall the pandemic has definitely brought us closer to our goal by bringing more people into the second-hand market. And we saw different drivers. So first, the consumer environmental mindset that changed. People were more conscious, and the approach of consumption was really different than before the pandemic. Second, I would say that the economic instability driving more traffic because of two main reasons: affordability of the second-hand market, and the second one was the potential extra revenue they could have from. And the third point was the digital and remote era at this moment, of course. And I think some of you experience it when we had the time to be at home, and we just slowed the pace and started to look into our wardrobe. People have had more time to sort out their closets, and sometimes no choice to buy online. So just to give you some figures for Vestir Collective, so year over year in 2020, the deposit increase was plus 96%, and the other plus 104%.
Wow, those are incredible numbers, and as I think it really even emphasized what Michael said at the beginning. It can be actually the accelerator if you adjust your ways of working and to the new reality, right?
Yes, and I would kind of like to go back to what Francis said about financial performance, because as BCG reports, by Christmas, in the 10 months leading up to Christmas, the pandemic has put severe strain on the financial performance of art institutions and luxury giants, as you mentioned yourself. But so, how do you think? To what extent can the incorporation of both sustainability measures, and I'm speaking sustainability as you said, in a broad spectrum, including equality, diversity, and the SDG goals. How do you think incorporating those sustainability measures into Tate's strategy for 2021 and the years to come can help you improve your financial performance?
Well, honestly, I think we have to recognize that the growth model, at least for the time being, is over for museums, so that we won't be chasing the kind of incomes that we chased in the past, and that those KPIs are simply not achievable. However, I do think that we can do some real innovation around resources. I'm really interested in the comparison with the second-hand clothes model, because we have a unique resource in museums, which is our permanent collections. And we don't do very much with them. We put them on permanent display and we change them. But the collections are like icebergs. and they have these huge resources that never see the light of day. And when you think about sustainable models in industry, I'm really interested in the cradle to cradle idea, where you have a production process that continuously returns its materials to source and reinvents itself. And the collection is a perfect example of something that you can use in a cradle to cradle way, because there are from 70,000 works of art in our holdings, we can tell 70 million different stories for almost no cost. So we have this incredible resource that is already extracted from the planet and yet is simply not used. So I think it's about revaluing what we have already in the institution. And then I think we need to look at things like, what does it mean to be a public institution? What is membership? Who will support us in what we do? So I'm very interested, and I don't have the answers, in asking some big questions about the model. Of course, we need to generate income. We need to be sustainable financially as well in terms of our carbon emissions. But there are other ways possibly of approaching those targets than the model that has evolved over the museum sector in the last 50 years or so, which is essentially a kind of neoliberal profit-driven model.
But this is, I think, what you just said, Frances, is very interesting in regards, as you mentioned. Basically, we've got this financial perspective, but we also have this sustainable perspective, how we actually can combine those two elements. Yet one of the elements that we learn while through the analysis of working with different clients, that basically trackability, KPIs are very, very important. And Michael Kering seemed to be really a leader within this field. You've been just at Davos, the announce of the top % of the sustainable businesses in the world. A huge congratulations. And one of the elements that really is leading to that is this environmental P&L that is allowing you really to track and follow the KPIs and ensure that the progress that you are doing across the whole basically supply chain is not lost and is actually continuous. So how do you see this going forward? Do you think that this is exactly the way the companies should follow to ensure that you are literally able to combine both this financial and sustainable perspective?
I think companies need to move along a path. So we made a significant effort from starting in 2011 to begin the process of measuring and monitoring all the impacts of the raw materials, all our supply chain processes. We had to map all that. So it was a great exercise, I think, in terms of understanding the business from a sustainability perspective and even from a business perspective. But not every company may choose to do that kind of exercise. But they may start with something like a science-based target where they have to look at their scope 3 along their supply chain. That could be one example. Another example could be other measurement frameworks. We're not saying like we have the magic formula, but we find the ePNL is really useful for us to understand our footprint, to understand impacts not just on climate, but biodiversity. It's helping us on the climate side with things like TCFD, but it's also helping us when we look at how do we understand our interplay with biodiversity, with other elements of nature, and the value, if you will, we extract from nature. How do we minimize or even give back? So it's become a very important tool for us. It's open sourced. So if you go to our website, you can go link to the open source database and you can drill into it and you can play in it. You can download the KPIs, and other brands have actually used those to do their own calculations. But the idea is to present something that everyone can use.
But that's I think exactly working together is exactly the key to make the change, right? And I think that this open sources is one of the elements that you actually allow other companies, let's say, to speed up the process, which I think is great.
Yes, so unfortunately we have to slowly finish up. However, last question I would like to ask you, Dunia. BCG with Vogue Poland is currently working on a report which will be published later this quarter. It's called Consumers' Adaptation to Sustainability in Fashion and Luxury. And in this report, what we've found is that a 20% ecology-related price increase reduces demand, and these are new studies conducted in the past few months, reduces demand by a whooping 50%. So how does it affect Vestiaire Collective's business model? And do you think that consumers will eventually become willing to pay more for a product that is also more sustainable, or is it unlikely? And also in the long run, do you think that their willingness to do so will remain on a similar level, or can it be expected to grow in the next 10, 20 years realistically?
So I said it was a pretty long question, but I think the debate is biased by the question. So for me, you cannot compare price and attractivity and durability, for instance, at the single product level. So for me, sustainability and for Vestiaire is about a global and a larger consumption shift that can be summed up by buying less, buying better. So it's not about spending more for the same piece of clothing, but rather how we can shift and move progressively away from a wasteful fast fashion model in which quantity is over durability. And it's about showing people that you can consume just differently. So I like to, and I know that we don't have much time, so I won't be long. But for instance, that is that is a shift that was operating the organic food, for instance, and people just change the way they consume. And by choosing the organic food, by reducing reducing the meat they were consuming, at that time. So I think it's possible, but we can see, and we did also a report with BCG on our own later last year. And obviously, even if affordability, selection, availability, and item uniqueness is the main driver, sustainability increased. So in 2018, it was 62% of the people who were choosing sustainability first, and it was accelerated by the pandemic, and now the number in 2020 was 70%. So I guess it's a combination of what we are willing to do, how consumer want to change the way they consume, and how we can partner actually, because I do totally agree on that fact that we need to change all together and to share, as Keren is doing a great job with the EPNL, share our expertise in all the area of sustainability.
That's very interesting. And kind of to wrap up this discussion, different points of view that were raised here today, could I ask each of you to share a short personal reflection on sustainability? The conference, this mini conference is called Sustainable Reflections for 2021. So it would be great if we could hear from your perspective, from your industry, from your company, what is the sustainable reflection for 2021? Maybe Francis, if we could start with you.
I suppose that what is astonishing, 80% of our emissions at Tate come from travel. The COVID has taken out 80% of our emissions. And from now on, I'm traveling in my head.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And now, Michael.
I think it's accelerating synergies. Like we just talked about, and sharing best practices, and not going back to everyone talks about a new normal. So I think the new normal can be a good thing, that we've benefited from this experience as a species, as societies, and as companies, and can do something like different now and better.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Michael. And Dunya?
And I would say that for me, as well as for Vestiaire, we want to trigger the systemic change. So I'm joining Michael. There is no new normal. It's just how we reinvent sustainability into the fashion industry and how we trigger this systemic change by being part of this solution and sharing with all the stakeholders.
Thank you guys very much. This is very insightful. What I am definitely taking out of it is that, first of all, we all can accelerate our sustainability efforts regardless of the COVID if we really adapt well, we work together, and we share, as Michael mentioned. Thank you guys very much.
Okay, so let us move on to the next panel called Clean Energy. Are we moving fast enough to prevent a catastrophe?
The last few months appeared with some meaningful climate agenda declarations, especially from US and China, the world's two biggest CO2 emitters, that together contribute around 43% of the full emissions. Europe, that in 2019 expressed aspiration to become first climate neutral continent, did not lag behind, as its leaders struck a deal on landmark worth 1.8 trillion euros, worth 7-year budget and recovery fund. It was decided that 30% of the sum will be dedicated to support exactly the green transition.
Meanwhile, private players continue to develop technologies that are meant to support the efforts of the public actors. So can they achieve this synergy before it gets too late? The debate on that matter will involve the following speakers. Mate Rimac, founder of a Croatian car company, Ricat Automobili, known for its world-leading innovations in high-performance EV technology for automotive brands like Porsche, Hyundai, Seat, Renault, and more. Mate founded the company 2011, but he had already established himself as a relentless innovator and gifted inventor many years earlier.
Lars Feste, who leads Boston consulting group Greater China Work. Previously, Lars led the firm's global client team, before that, the Nordic system, which includes Stockholm, Helsinki, Oslo, and Copenhagen. He was the global leader of the transformation practice and BCG turn prior to his current role.
And Mirosław Proppe, CEO of WWF Poland, associated with KPMG since 1994, one of the largest auditing and consulting firms in Poland and the world. While partner, he was head of the public administration and infrastructure advisory team in CEE. He worked as a manager, pursued projects in the area of social policy as well as in environmental protection. There are 8 supply chains, so the food industry, fashion, FMCG, electronics, and also automotive, that account for over 50% of global emissions. So if you could just tell us what kind of efforts is Rimac undertaking to make its downstream operations greener?
Yeah, absolutely. So auto industry and mobility in general is a huge contributor, of course. And not just in the usage of the energy, but also in manufacturing the goods, because cars are big, heavy, complex parts. Complex
Yes, I mean, I definitely agree with you about the meat consumption, that decreasing or reducing and eliminating meat consumption is a crucial element of achieving our sustainability goals. However, let's not forget that the food industry is not the only one. So the shift and innovation in the automotive industry is also very important. So just to follow up on what you just said, Mate, so more and more players are joining the electric car race, and the latest prominent example being Volkswagen. Yet, despite the widespread media coverage of the technology, electric vehicles constitute only for 3% of the total new car sales. So, what, in your opinion, are the prospects for development of electromobility, and can electric cars eventually dominate the automobile industry?
They will, for sure. I think we are beyond the point of no return, where there is a consensus in the industry that electrification will for sure happen. It's just a matter of the curve. So, and the curve is pretty steep right now. But when will all cars be electric? I think that's not really the question. So we have here, I'm just looking at a huge parking lot in front of our company. And currently, I would say 5% of the cars on this parking lot are electric. And sometimes, you know, when we have guests here, people ask me, when will this parking lot be full electric? I'm saying never. It will never be full electric. It will be, in my opinion, 20, 30% people owning and driving cars and parking them for 97% of the time anymore. Actually, the next thing will happen where cars are being used as a mobility service instead of a asset. So people will not be drivers and owners, they will be users. And that will have really big impact. Those cars will be electric, mostly because the decision is not anymore with the end user, but because the end user has irrational choices. The end user thinks they need 500, 600 kilometers because once per year they go to grandma, and they need 600 kilometers of range. Well, in reality, they need 20 kilometers of range on average. So you have these big companies that, like Waymo or Uber, who will have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of cars, all of them connected and optimized for a specific purpose. And those cars will be utilized 60, 70% of the time instead of 3%. That's really the big change is coming. So electrification is just one piece of the puzzle. It's just one little aspect of it. I think the much bigger change is coming through new mobility solutions.
Yeah, but then there's a subscription model would hopefully entail of mostly electric cars. So even if the business model would change, still the source of power would also hopefully change with positive impact, net impact on the environment.
Absolutely, that goes hand in hand. So not just the power source, but also energy generation. But as I said, once we have more optimized fleets, that's also some additional synergy effects, not just going electric, but also using those assets in a much more intelligent way.
So could you share with us your personal reflection on sustainability? Can be, really personal, as you mentioned, for example, about the meat consumption, but can be also related to Rimac itself.
Well, personally, I'm really concerned because I think what we are leaving behind us is going to be much different than what we as a generation found. Now the majority of biomass on the planet is controlled by humans. So humans used to be a tiny portion of the global biomass, meaning kilos of living creatures on the planet. So just, I think, like 1 or 2% a few hundred years ago. And now us and our livestock, so the cows, the pigs and chicken and so on, that we are, let's say, controlling, is actually, I think, 90% or something like that of the biomass. Yeah, so overnight. So that's absolutely terrible. And I think, there's, of course, a huge inertia in the global ecosystem. And in our short lifespans, we don't really see the effects of that yet, but I think we have really destroyed. I mean, this tells you that we have already destroyed the planet, and it's something else. So I think, the next generations will probably live in a world without wild animals, will live in a world without wild fish, where everything has to be produced, to be consumed. So to be honest, I think we are beyond the point of no return. That doesn't mean the planet will be inhabitable. It's just going to be absolutely different from what it used to be for thousands and millions of years before us.
So the US presidential election resulted in a victory of a candidate with the most progressive climate agenda in Americans' history. Joe Biden, who instantly rejoined the Paris Agreement after being sworn in, has very ambitious targets for his homeland, which are to net zero emissions by 2050 and carbon-free power by 2035. So do you think these goals are attainable, particularly given the split Congress? And what do you think they mean for the world?
Thank you for this question. I think the answer is in two parts. One is what does it mean for the politics in the US? And I think, as I understand, the green agenda, climate agenda is very high on the priorities for Mr. Biden. So I believe he will be doing everything possible to go through the Congress and to implement the policies he intends to do. As always in the politics, there are some trade-offs and there are some negotiations going behind the scenes, which I understand fully. But I think, as far as I'm aware, that this green agenda is high enough on the priorities that maybe some other issues will be less important or traded in the policy negotiations. So from this point of view, I think this is a very good sign, and it's true. America is the country that needs to be leading or co-leading with European Union on bringing the green and climate agenda to the global table. But the second part is in my opinion, much more important, because on the political side, on international level, it was possible for many countries to say we will postpone or maybe we will not join the transformation because the largest economy, the US, is not joining, is withdrawing from Paris Agreement. Now this argument is gone, and those countries will have to follow. And that's the question: why they follow, and why China and Korea and why European Union are also targeting the same direction. Because, and maybe not everyone understands this, but this is the new setup of the new design of what's the competitive advantage for the future, for this century and next centuries. It's not as we thought at that until now, that it is just simply, delivering more and more. That this is something about looking long term. How is your company able to be sustainable? Meaning, being able to deliver what is the mission, what is the goal, to deliver to the customers over 50 years, over 100 years. If you think about power distribution, for instance, if your mission is to deliver power to households and businesses, does it mean that you have to do it in 19th century way with distribution over the cords, over the wires from one big entity that produce energy into the houses? Or maybe you can manage a cloud of little generation places where you balance the electricity with local storage, energy storage. So this is really something competitive, because the customers are pushing this way, regulators are pushing this way. So the business leaders who understands that this is the real change and this is real question will win this race. And I believe Mr. Biden, this is what he is telling to American business, that hello, you have to find your new competitive advantage. You have to find your new business models. And I believe that, as always, not everyone, but many US companies will find this new definition and will win the race. And that's why it's important step for the global economy, because other companies will look at those companies and will follow the new patterns.
And Miroslav, because I totally agree with yourself that when you say that, basically both the macro perspective, political perspective, but also companies and us as individuals, what also Mate mentioned at the beginning, are very important to work together towards one goal, right? Because us together within the whole ecosystem, we can make the change. Yet the question is that considering the situation where we are, considering the pandemic situation that is with us already for the last year and is going to be for another month at least, question is, do you believe that this ambitions, that very, ambition goals, both the countries, but also the companies, and even maybe some individuals had in regards to the sustainable change, do they actually have the chance to happen, considering the pandemic challenges, especially, for example, for the companies in regards to the liquidity, to the problems with liquidities, for the, even if we look at the fashion industry, that is the second, let's say, dirtiest industry in the world with the 10% of emission, one of the biggest cash liquidities problems are within this industry, right? So do actually these companies, they have the power, and is it the time that they will actually make the change now, or it's going to be somehow stopped because of the pandemic?
Well, that's a very good question. And, I think today it's either or, and there is no crystal clear or anyone who would tell you, yes, this will go that way or that way. I think pandemics has taught us what Matt was saying, that we as individual customers, maybe we can change our habits. We thought that we have to have a car to commute every day to workplace, and as Matt was saying, then leaving this car on the parking lot and really using a car only for a few percent of lifespan. So today pandemics taught us that maybe not every day we need to go to the office, but still we can work remotely. So this is about defining the new way. So this is the possibility. We can use this pandemic to learn. In European Union, we have this opportunity also that there is this special funding, Recovery and Resilient Fund, which is the first debt by the European Union, to use this capital to change the models. So this is the opportunity. But on the other hand, and this is the point where I disagree with Matt, is that it's not so easy thing to do, because it's not only on, or it's not even on the technology level, or the design of the processes in your company or something like this. This is a mental change.
Yeah.
It's easy to say, let's reduce the meat we eat. Yes, and I agree. We have changed 75% of the lands, and most of this is used for either crop production for the livestock or taking the fossil fuels from the ground. This is true, but do you believe that you can go, let's say, to lower 50% of a population of the Belgium or France or Italy or Sweden or even the US, this part of the population that earn less than average? And can you tell this part of the society do not eat meat? I don't think this is feasible, because people, maybe they don't eat enough meat, and this is something what they treasure as a special thing to have from time to time. This is number one. Number two, the development pattern today is we should follow the way how people in the West are able to eat meat 6 times a day, on breakfast, on the second breakfast, lunch, something in the afternoon, and a dinner in the evening. And then maybe when you watch Netflix, you finish also with something to eat. So to change this pattern, on the one hand, it's easy to say, but on the emotional level, it's not so easy. It's not so easy to say, I will not have a car and I will use always a rent car. And it's true that from economic point of view, it's better to rent a car for short distances in the city, and once a year, if I need to go somewhere with my friends or family, a couple of 100 kilometers for vacation or visiting someone, yes, I will rent a bigger car, so I don't need a big car. But the big car is also emotion for many people, and big car is showing a status of people. So this is really what is the challenge and what is the change all about, that we need to change our thinking. And from myself, as you were introducing me, I was working in one of the big companies. I was my life looked differently, my consumption looked differently. It looks totally different today, but I know how many times I had to, even I believe in this change, how many times I had to speak to myself and convince myself again and again for changing the patterns. So from this point of view, it's not so easy. Are we able to have time for this adoption of the change, of the need for the change? I don't know. That there is too many factors that are influencing this. One, I have to really understand it. Second, there is so many misinformation and data flowing around that some people are misled, but also politicians, many of them, and it was not only Mr. Trump, but we can see it in many countries throughout all the world, who are using emotions to play just for the short time political winnings, forgetting the real change that is necessary. So that's a very big question, and this is something that all the leaders really need to think. The business leaders and political leaders need to think and really understand that if they don't promote this change, which is not easy, for sure, that if we don't promote this change today, the world will look very different, and it will be very hard to live for our children and grandchildren, because the conditions of the planet will really change.
But what is really coming out of the discussion of our panel, I believe, is that each person, each company, each government organization has put the place in ecosystem to make the change. That this is really even to the role of the simple individual, not only companies, not only the politicians, but to all of us.
Yes,
Absolutely.
I would love to do some more follow-up questions, but we're running out of time. But I would love to hear more about the dam situation in Poland. But perhaps our viewers should maybe Google this topic, because it's a very interesting example of how because obviously innovation is connected to sustainability. So innovation is the driver of sustainability, but sometimes we have to verify whether this innovation is actually helping the environment.
That's absolutely true, and I understand this is the end of time, but I can tell you that the hydropower, because the dams are connected to hydropower, for many years was thought that this is green energy and so on. But if you look at the data, and unfortunately you need a long time data, but if you look at this data, then you can see that it's not. And also, it's not fair from point of view of free economy, because if you think about the dam and the hydropower, the dam is usually a cost for the society because it's paid and maintained through taxes. So all the society pays for the dam, but the profits, so sales of the energy, goes only to the owner of the turbine, of the electricity company, which is not fair from the point of view of free economy. So this is just one example how we should rethink the whole model.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mirosław. Unfortunately, we have to stop, but it was very interesting discussions.
Extremely.
And thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you. So, Lars, we briefly discussed with Mirosław and Mate about the US presidential elections. We also discussed the impact the politics may have for the industries. And of course, we simply must ask about Beijing. That is the world's largest emitter that currently, in the last year only, it was responsible for around 28% of the global emissions. And China's Xi Jinping has recently committed his country to achieve carbon neutrality till 2060. Do you believe such pledges are even realistic considering the status quo?
Thanks for inviting me. And I have to say, I'm an optimist, and it's clear at the same time that the stretch target that has been put out by President Xi is really something special. As you say, China is responsible for the most emissions in the world. And what President Xi has committed is to reach carbon neutrality by 2060. And actually, BCG has done a climate strategy for China, working with the NDRC, the National Development and Reform Commission. And we have calculated the most efficient way for China to meet that target. And that target that President Xi had set forward is actually the same as the Paris Accord. To meet 1.5 degrees, China will need to reduce CO2 by 75 to 80% by 2050 and peak out in 2030. But what is important to say is that China is quite far actually on many dimensions already, both on power, building nuclear power plants, but also on renewables, also on EV vehicles. They are leading in many respects. And one other example I want to give is China implemented a couple of years ago a program called Blue Sky. We all remember that have been in China sometimes how thick the air could be. And just in a couple of years, they have really implemented a totally different setup. So the quality of the air in the big cities have improved remarkably. So I have to say that it is a stretch target. It's also a target that without China meeting that, the world will not be able to meet 1.5 or 2 degrees. Yeah. So it's very important. But I'm an optimist, and I'm seeing that there is both decision-making and determination, and there are also examples of follow-through that makes me think positively about the opportunity.
So, Lars, do you think such innovations and transformations are the way to go for developing economies? So let's take an example of India, third largest emitter. Often they justify their level of emissions by pointing out that more advanced countries have been allowed to grow without interruption, which is why New Delhi's quest for economic transformation should also be accepted. So what do you think? Can dynamic growth be combined with sustainable policies for innovation, or that we just discussed? And do you think India will take inspiration from a fellow BRICS member, China's bold climate pledge?
Well, I think it's a very difficult discussion, right? If people are living in the hundreds of millions below the poverty line, and when to push for productivity and growth and wealth, and when to start investing into the green economy. I can see in China, our analysis in China shows that this investment will cost between 90 and 100 trillion renminbi, so it's around $15 trillion over the next 30 years, and that is roughly equal to 2% of the GDP every year. And this investment will lead to tremendous amount of jobs. And so we actually believe, and also we have run several models, not on India, but on China, models on Germany. And our conclusion on this is that this kind of investment, innovation, and drive towards the green transition actually drives more jobs, not less. So we believe that for China especially, and I'm in China now, that this will also stimulate the economy. But I have to say on India, I'm not an expert on India, and it is definitely a difficult discussion to have. right? And that's also why the Chinese has pushed the discussion out so long. But it's also remarkable to see that once you then take the decision and start saying this is important, it's not just growth that is important, then it can actually move quite quickly.
I think what Lars, you're saying in regards to the stage of development where you are and the opportunities that it brings is super relevant exactly for such developing economies and to understand what is actually possible and not. But what is really optimistic, and I think what not many both people or even sometimes organizations/companies are not aware of, is another thing that you mentioned, which is basically that this green stimulus is actually a good thing for generating more jobs, more opportunities, not the opposite, right? That this is just the additional cost that the countries or companies are bearing, and there is no upside for this, because this, of course, that would be the totally different discussion. So I think this is really the optimistic part of that, people need to be aware of, both on the individual level, but company level as well.
That's right. And, the thing is that if many countries has argued that they cannot do it because China is producing cheaper. If China really starts to push as the biggest emitter and biggest production hub in the world in this direction, there is really no excuse, right? And they are moving the bar for the rest.
Yeah, and Lars, just to build up a bit on what you just said, so considering, the 2060 pledge and also these opportunities to grow the market, how would it impact, for example, the jobs in potentially vulnerable sectors, like, for example, coal minings? Would it be replaced with more attractive alternatives?
Yeah, of course. This is a big impact. China has a lot of coal themselves, but also imports a lot of coal, and there will be a transition of those industries, right? And a lot of the power generation, I think 65% of the power production today is made by coal, and we see that needs to change tremendously, right? And actually, China is very good at building nuclear power plants and also very strong on solar and also on wind. So you will see that jobs will transition into those sectors. And to your point, many of those sectors will be higher value add and better jobs. So in that way, will improve the quality of the economy. And that's also, if you've seen the G14's 5-year plan, they are very focused on improving not only the environment, but also the quality of the economy.
That's great. So before we wrap up, just one last question, Lars, to yourself about your personal reflection on sustainability.
Yeah, I think sustainability. It's very clear. Traveling the world and also being in China, it's very clear that it's imminent, it's important, and world leaders over the last, especially half year, have tuned in and gotten serious about it. And what I see is that humankind can move mountains, and it's not difficult. We have created an analysis in China where we have laid out 50 existing technologies, and we have rank ordered them to see how China can reach the 1.5 degree. And it's a question of 2% GDP per year investment that will drive growth, but it's possible. We know the technologies, and we can see that when the decision making, and the execution can be driven through, then it's possible. So that's why I started saying I'm an optimist.
So this is the end of our final panel. Massive thanks to our participants for tuning in and shedding some light on the progress of decarbonizing actions.
And now please welcome the head of BCG Warsaw, Octavian Zając, who's going to close the conference.
What a great and really interesting and inspiring discussion. But let me actually step back for a while and share with you perspective on the climate challenge that I believe is probably the biggest challenge that the humankind is currently facing. So if we look at some of the basic numbers on climate, like CO2 atmospheric concentration, over the last couple of hundreds of years, we see that over the last decades, humanity has actually massively affected climate, and the emissions have actually spiked substantially versus the historical levels. Now, 2020 came, and obviously COVID reduced for a while the greenhouse gases emissions. It did so, but it did not actually change the trajectory. The overall trajectory is clearly still growing. And if we look back, a couple of decades actually back, there were several events, several profound events that also helped to reduce greenhouse gases emissions to the atmosphere. Events such as World War II, so 7% decline, US Great Depressions, 13% decline, or many other crises. However, as I said, it did not change the overall trend. And then another clear message is that we are still very far away from 1.5 degree target or 2 degrees target. We are also very far away from individual commitments of the countries from the Paris Agreement. So if we don't change anything, the gap will actually widen. And in 2020, especially around April, yes, we did see the sharp decline of emissions. But what we saw just a couple of weeks after or a few months after is that we really came back to the old ways. Now, if we look at individual countries and their plans, we see that actually not a single country is actually fully in line with the 2 degree target, especially the biggest emitters. So under the current plans, they will make some progress, but that would be nowhere near to fulfill the ambitions of the 2 degree world. And obviously, with China and India planning to grow by 2050 by 3 times for China and 7 times for India, it will be even more difficult to deliver on that ambitious target of 1.5 degree or 2 degree warming. Now, there is some good news from China, and as well as good news from US after the recent elections. In China, for example, the country has declared that it will go carbon neutral by 2060. That will be a huge effort that will require cutting overall emissions by 70 to 80% by 2050. And that will require actions in almost every single part of the economy. Now, another good news is that 70 to 90% of that reduction, depending on the country, will be possible within actually current, already known technologies. That's not going to be cheap because it's going to cost us about $28 trillion, according to our calculations. But what will be much more painful would be this last mile, the last 25% to get to the 2 degree warming target. That would involve technologies like carbon capture storage, like synthetic fuels, that will be much more expensive and much more painful in implementation. So that's additional $75 trillion to deliver on this last mile. That gives us the total bill of going there of over $100 trillion, which is a huge, huge number. Now, it's clear that governments and countries alone will not suffice to deliver on the ambitious target of 2 degree or 1.5 degree warming. So it requires actions from all of the stakeholders, starting with companies that actually need to set the ambitious agendas and the right targets. Then they need to deliver on them and actually innovate and change their business models to succeed in the future. It requires investors to push for more transparency on climate, on emissions, and to allocate capital when there are economic when there is economic sense and when it also makes sense from environmental perspective. Now, for governments, it's about setting the right ambitions, setting the right roadmaps, and putting in place the right policies, for example, around carbon pricing or around some specific incentives for climate related technologies. But finally, I would like to really stress the importance of individual actions. So the actions of each of us, the actions related to what products we buy, what diet we have, and how we actually commute to work. And that will also have a substantial impact in helping us to get to a better world in the future. So the future is really in our hands. And at the end, I would like to really thank to all of you for participating in this conference. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for really engaging and inspiring discussions. And I really hope to see you very soon. Thank you very much.